All right, welcome back, Thor. You were at the Senior Bowl, boots on the ground, as they like to say. And I wanted to ask you right before the break, who was the Deebo Samuel corollary in this Senior Bowl? Who was the guy that walked in and was the alpha of the show at the Senior Bowl this year?
This year, McConkey was the guy who was like that, where initially guys were playing up on him on the line. He'd break their ankles off the line, and then he would just be free. He'd be, frolicking about, and then the quarterback would hit him on the hands, and then he'd be running downfield by himself. And you started to see later on in the Tuesday one-on-ones, and then especially on Wednesday, it was more exaggerated. They weren't holding him like Dell. What they did with McConkey in the one-on-ones, they would play 8 yards off him. So they would just say, go ahead and take the free, easy completion. I don't care, but you're not busting my ankles off the line and then running around me, because I've seen it over and over and over again, you doing that to my contemporaries. So he was the guy that changed the behavior of the defensive backs in the one-on-one way more than anyone else this week. True sign of respect in terms of that. McConkey is really, really good. You see this on his tape for sure, but in person, you get even more of a sense of it. Just looking at the PFF numbers, some people, you just look at the stats, or maybe you just only got exposure to a couple Georgia games. Georgia doesn't throw the ball a ton. It's the same reason why, like Michigan, the throwing prospects get nitpicked because the volume's not there and people just look at the stats, whatever. So you got to look at some different kind of stats to measure guys like this. Ladd McConkey, you look at PFF receiving grade versus single coverage last year, 98th percentile, Ladd McConkey. You look at Ladd McConkey's separation percentile last year, 93rd percentile. Separation percentile against single coverage, 91st percentile. You go on down the list. It's impossible to stay with that guy. Last year he missed some games. He was nicked up, and again, the volume wasn't there because they don't throw a ton, and then they're blasting people, and sometimes the starters got yanked a little bit early. But when he's on the field, he creates separation like you and I breathe air. And, if you throw the ball in this kitchen, he's catching it. It just is what it is. Really hard to stick with.
Here's the thing with Ladd. I someone early on, like during the season, late in the season, said something about Ladd McConkey, and I was like, is this a joke? Like, because I don't know college football. You're right. I was that guy you're talking about. But then we started to dig in, and of course, now I'm in the process, and I'm falling in love with Ladd McConkey. Some of the things that look, man coverage in the NFL is run at the lowest rate it's ever been run at. They're running more and more zone every single year. Zone rate goes up. Ladd McConkey was 4.27 yards per route run at the collegiate level against zone coverage. I think it was only Malik Neighbors was ahead of him. I mean, he is just an absolute zone killer. He was like missed tackles forced per route run was at like 30%, one of the highest in the class. So he's catching the ball against zone, making people miss. Now, nobody's going to confuse him for Malik Neighbors, but he's put up a few of those metrics at the college level that were, approaching what Malik Neighbors was doing. And Malik Neighbors did that same thing. We'll get to him in a moment. I would just ask you, Ladd McConkey constantly gets lazy comps. Please don't do that, or I'll have to throw you out of the club. Thank you. Who does he remind you of as a player? Because I think a lot of people will throw around some just random white guys. But honestly, I think he's a bit different player than that. Who does he remind you of?
Well, it's funny what you were saying about the zone stuff, because I have in my notes, I had a sentence in there where devilishly clever against zone coverage. Yes. He's just super duper clever, and he knows the coverage look right away. And, yes, the way that he's running the route or what he's doing on that, it's all in response to that. But yeah, with the zone coverage, he's finding that soft spot right away and making himself available to the quarterback. It just is what it is. I feel like I'm gonna have a lazy comp. I don't have a perfect one yet. He's around the size of Amendola. I think he might have Amendola by an inch, around the same weight. But he's a better version of Amendola.
I guess it's just we always go to the white guy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's just what happened. I mean, and Cooper Kupp is one of those guys. I don't know that he's exactly Cooper Kupp either, but he's more than like Tyler Boyd, isn't he? Or at least he projects to have a higher ceiling than what Tyler Boyd does, if that's the way to say it. I mean, obviously, look, if he ends up having a Tyler Boyd career, there's no shame in that. But I think we can project him to have a potentially higher ceiling than that, is what I guess I'm getting at. He's not necessarily slot only at the next level with the way he can win against man too, that he proved at the Senior Bowl. I wonder if he's a little bit more of a dual threat player than just a slot only guy. I'm just not sure about that. I'm wondering if what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, and he did. So last year, he, again, like he didn't play the full season, so this is a smaller sample, but 78.7% of his snaps were taken on the outside. Now, I will say the constitution of the Georgia offense, they were in 12 personnel most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, because you have Bowers and then you had Delp. And the year
there's
before,
no slot. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. But the year before it was Bowers and Darnell Washington, right? So typically that's going to take care of that. But in an offense like that, where you had two tight ends a lot, I think he could absolutely be the outside, the number 2 outside receiver, whatever. Like, for instance, like the Vikings, if the Vikings didn't have Jordan Addison and then it was like McConkey across from Jefferson, in the offense where you have Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, he could absolutely do that. Where he's the pure slot, it's, the offense where you have the 3 wide. But like the, 12 personnel offense, he absolutely could handle, the outside, whatever. Some of these designations, you're sort of mentioning it with like the thing of the less, the NFL runs a lot more zone coverage now, stuff like this. Some of this stuff, it's misnomers, and different stuff like this. McConkey, traditionally, that his game's going to fit best for the slot in the traditional way that people think about it, but he's absolutely going to get outside snaps at the next level, and he's going to do well with it. For the guy we talked about last year, like this Smith and Jigba, he took 30% snaps on the outside this year. Yeah, for the Seahawks as a rookie. Right. So definitely, and McConkey can definitely do that as well.